nor does my protagonist, Doc Ford. Those planes went somewhere. Uh, fortunate, Fortunately for me, one of my old fishing guide friends, Mark Futch, and there is a character in the book Night Moves named Dan Futch who much resembles Mark. Mark's not only a superb fishing guide, he is one of the country's finest seaplane pilots. Mark has logged more than 50,000 hours in seaplanes. And so we've talked about this mystery for a number of years. What happened to these planes? Their last contact, they still had an hour and a half, perhaps 2 hours of fuel left, and 145 knots. Cover a lot of ground. So Mark, who knows far more than I about planes and these things, had and still has a theory. And he proved the validity of his theory this way. On a winter afternoon, last winter, we took off from Boca Grande, Florida, which is near Fort Myers, Port Charlotte, Sarasota, south of Tampa, in his seaplane. And we flew to Fort Lauderdale, from which the adventures left. And we flew, I think, an altitude of about 1,800 feet. And behind us was a southwest tailwind, and that tailwind increased our ground speed by about 45 knots. Big southeast tailwind. Landed in Lauderdale, had dinner. Flew back before sunset, and we climbed to about 4,400 feet. And we caught a huge northeast tailwind. Now at 1,800 feet, it was still blowing from the southwest. At 4,200 feet, it was blowing hard from the northeast. And we gained almost 50 knots of ground speed. So imagine this. It is 1945. You have no GPS. You have 2 gyro compasses. The only way of fixing one's point is by radio triangulation. The radios were not particularly good in those days. It would have been literally like flying in a shoebox on a cloudy, dark night, which it was. Those planes could have overflown the peninsula of Florida in less than 40 minutes. So those planes ended up somewhere. So I have been fascinated by that story for a number of years. And can I do one more thing? In the book Night Moves, there is a setting that may strike you as fantastic, but it's an absolutely actual place. In the book Night Moves, it's called the Bone Field. And that's what I call it. Gosh, 15 years ago or so, an old Florida cracker fisherman buddy of mine told me this story. He said, my daddy and me, years back when I was a boy, for whatever reason, we went way back in the mangroves, and we found this place. There was human bones everywhere. Everywhere. And I said, do you think you can find this place again? And he said, well, we can try, and we did. And we took 3 or 4 false attempts, and then we pulled up to this mangrove spot, and all mangroves look alike. And they do. It's hard to get your bearings in the mangroves. Waded in through the red mangroves, became buttonwoods, white mangroves, and black mangroves, which indicates a slight elevation. And in this marl plain, and marl's like this gray clay, but still in this cavernous area, completely overhung by black and white mangroves. You couldn't see it from the air. I started looking at uprooted trees. And it took a while for my eyes to adjust, or to accumulate the sensitivity to what I was seeing. And I saw a human jaw. And I saw a human skull. And there were human bones everywhere. I found a human femur that had been sawn almost precisely in half. It's a real place. I took back 2 bone samples and showed them to archaeologists from the University of Florida. And their belief was and is that they are pre-Columbian or date back to the time of Spanish contact. But to this date, no archaeologist has ever visited this place. So to write about that spot in this book was a hoot.
So in 1945, they didn't have GPS, but they didn't equip planes with black boxes either, did they?
No, it was like flying a go-kart. And something I discovered, and perhaps you ladies and gentlemen know, even though almost all of you are younger than me, is that between 1941 and 1946 in this nation, just in training missions alone, on our own ground, we lost more than 15,000 pilots, just in training missions, before they ever got to the South Pacific or the European theater. Can you imagine if we lost 50 in 1 year? The headlines would be 15,000. That generation was
But we didn't really have a standing professional Air Force going into the war, did we, of any size? Wasn't that part of the deal? They
no,
had
it's
to
called the
train-
Army, it was the Army Air Corps.
Right, but I mean, they had to train a lot of, volunteers and young people and all to fight that war that weren't prepared.
I don't know, but still, what a heroic bunch. And my father, who was a state trooper, he was in the 101st Airborne, Screaming Eagles. So I've long been fascinated by that, not only the history of that generation.
Why is it that all five disappeared together rather than just one or two and one or two came back or something?
Well, there are a number of theories. One is that military people, you're instructed to, stay with your group, and perhaps that's the reason. From the few radio transmissions received, a few more that were actually overheard, and no one really has it straight. There's been very little original research done on this. The best book by far on the subject is a book by Gian, G-I-A-N, Quasar. And the title of the book is They Flew into Oblivion. And I got in touch with Mr. Quasar, and he very kindly helped me out in a great many things. But one theory is that they were instructed to stay together as a group, even though they were so confused and so lost. And the last transmission overheard, and again, it's almost all ancillary information, was that let's pull in tight when the first aircraft is down to 10 pounds of fuel, we'll all go in together. Now this was at 6 p.m. and they should have had an hour and a half of fuel left. So it's just, it is an iconic mystery. And it's lovely to think there might be a Bermuda Triangle or aliens out there snatching planes from the sky.
Or maybe they're flying somewhere still in the time tunnel. It's a happy thought.
That is a lovely thought.
Yeah, I really like that.
By gum, I think I believe you know. Not a chance in hell.
Didn't the movie Close Encounters start with that, the 5 planes missing? The movie Close Encounters?
I don't remember.
Absolutely true.
I think it's
Yeah. The spaceship shows up, and then the 5 Avengers land, and they're still 22-year-old guys. And
Okay, so I have a question. Was it a clear night so they could stay together because they could see each other?
no, they left. The weather was described as clear. Wind was blowing about 20-25 knots out of the southwest, but. And this original research I did in terms of weather, and there's not much in the Army Air Corps records. But by 5:30 p.m., sunset was at 5:55 p.m. There were 2 big storm fronts about to collide on the east coast of Florida. And I don't know if it was the perfect storm, but it was no time to be in the air.
Okay, and my other question is, we've talked about the radio stuff being pretty rudimentary, but could they at least talk to each other? Were they close enough to have radio contact
Well, that
even
no
if
one
they couldn't
knows.
see each other?
And no one really knows. There were transmissions overheard by another training pilot. And much of the information about this flight comes from an overheard conversations between these aircraft from one pilot, one trainer pilot. And even he was guessing at who was saying what. A commonly written theory is that these guys were all just kind of hayseed hip trainees. Well, that's not true. The leader of that training flight was a multi-decorated experienced fighter pilot who had fought in the South Pacific. Much is made of the fact that he had ditched a plane twice in the South Pacific. He'd gotten lost once in the South Pacific, ditched a plane. So it sounds like kind of a goof up done. He got lost, he's already gotten lost in the South Pacific, and he had to ditch a plane. Well, how many folks have flown over the South Pacific? And he got lost looking for an aircraft carrier after running a bombing mission on a stormy night in which they had no GPSs. He was trying to zero in on this radio signal, and that's getting lost. I would have ended up in Dubuque. I mean, these guys are heroes. And another lieutenant colonel was a highly decorated Marine pilot. These were not kids. These were not kids, and they were not goof-ups. They just, the equipment with which they were supplied was not equal to the circumstances, I think.
Well, you wrote a really killer book a while back in the Doc Ford saga about a shipwreck at sea and the people that did or did not survive it, and how difficult it was to find a lost boat out there in the ocean. So among the various potential theories we have here is they ditched the sea and nobody found them and eventually they went down, or they crashed somewhere and again nobody has yet found them. You haven't really given up hope that someday somebody may find them, have you?
No, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. And I'd love to play a role in it. You know, the Everglades, if you fly over the Everglades, and I'm sure many of you have, particularly if it's a low overcast day, the Everglades looks like shallow water. You can't tell whether you're over land, and the Everglades actually is water. So no one knows without a doubt.
So you will gather that one of the two mysteries in this wonderful novel is what might have happened to these 5 planes. Why shouldn't Randy supply you a theory? But there's another mystery that goes on in this book, so why don't we talk about that for a moment?
He actually reads my books.
I've actually memorized some parts of some of them.
What?
What is there are 2 mysteries. One is, what happened to the 5 planes, and that's part of what Doc Ford is looking at. But then,
Right, yeah.
then we have, actually, I could read you all the various components of this book according to Bruce, but he's taken up 3 paragraphs with subsidiary plots. But I'd like to think there is at least one large second mystery that's going on along with finding the planes. You remember what it is?
No? No, I do. No, yeah.
There's a reason I'm in this chair, people.
I should probably start joking around. People just think I'm a goofball, which I kind of am sometimes. But no, I take my writing very seriously. For whatever reason, in this book, I wanted to try to write 3 novels in one. Why, I have no idea. And that's true. It's absolutely true. It's the most common beginner's mistake when it comes to writing. What the hell's funny about that? But no, it's the most common beginner's mistake when it comes to writing. And I'm joking with you, but it's when we sit down to write a novel, particularly when we're inexperienced. It more often than not turns out we're trying to write 2 or 3 or 4 books at once. It is the most common beginner's error in writing novels. But the 20th Doc Ford novel, that's pretty special to me. And it struck me that my life does not fly arrow-like through the hours or the days of the week. It simply does not. If a friend shows up and says, let's go looking for planes, I may well drop everything, but there are still ancillary things involved in my life. Sometimes love and romance.
Sex always sells.
I'm not going to reply to that. And also ancillary obligations, things we have to do. Maybe we're buying a dog. Maybe we're dating someone new. So I wanted to write 3 books in one. And every book, when I get to about 20 or 25,000 words, I send it to my wonderful editor at Putnam's, Neil Nyren, just for kind of a check, like, how bad is this, or how off the path am I? And Neil wrote back, you know, I'm afraid you have too many balls in the air, you're spinning too many plates in the air. And, you know, I hope you're aware of that. And I said, yes, I am. And when I finished the book, he wrote, effectively, you know what, you pull it off. So it was not, much of my life has been accidental in so many ways, particularly my good fortune. But by gum, this complicated plot is not.
Well, let's talk about the saboteur for a moment, because when Doc Ford goes up with his friend Futch, I love that word, for a ride, they end up crash landing in the marsh because
They didn't crash, they just landed hot.
landed. Oh,
They just
You
landed
mean-
hot.
so they survived.
Yes.
Well, just asking. I mean, if you're saying hot and I'm saying crash, what's the difference?
Doc Ford and his pal Dan Futch landed hot. And
But define hot.
it's a way of not having to report a near crash to the FFA. That's landing hot. That's landing hot. And they land hot in the Everglades. Tomlinson's along, and Tomlinson does not handle this well, despite his spiritual superiority. Which it just delights me to no end, frankly. But yeah, they land hot in the Everglades, but my friend Mark has done this, and we've landed in the Everglades. So it kind of goes from there, and it has and the Florida, as is Arizona, the natural history is incredible, as is the social history. Dates back to the Anastasi here, to the Calusas in Florida, generically. Contemporaries, the Maya, the Olmec, the Toltec in Central and South America. These are ancient places. Ancient.
Yeah, you've written about the Calusa, and you've written about their shell islands and all kinds of wonderful stuff.
Remnants of Shell Pyramid. I live on the
Right.
remnants of Shell Pyramid. It dates back more than 4,000 years. Find pottery everywhere, wine gardens, shell tombs. These are ancient places we inhabit, and we're just a little lovely, wonderful blink of the eye. And, which is why the written word is so important. It is the one way. The one way I think that we have the opportunity to anchor our lives with the written word. Photographs don't work. You know, somebody said a photograph or a picture is worth 10,000 words. Baloney. If I see a photograph taken of me 10 or 15, 20 years ago, for one thing, it's just painful. And the other thing is, that's not me. That person no longer exists. It's a husk. Now, the photograph may jog a few memories. But if I read something I wrote 10 or 15 or 30 years ago, it's still alive. It is still alive. Can you imagine if your great-great-grandmother, or if you carry your genetics back to the time of the Anastasi here, or the Toltec, or the Olmec, or the Calusa, if one of those people, one, had written 2 honest paragraphs about their life, how incredible. How incredible. Well, we all have that opportunity. And if you have that calling to write, I would urge you to answer it.
So we have the question of who is the saboteur that brought down the plane. We already know Tomlinson's in the book because we know he was in the plane that went down hot, right? So that's good. Hannah Smith, talk to us a little bit about Hannah Smith because she seems to be sticking around.
I love Hannah Smith. A lot about it.
So
I like
may
you
Doc
better.
Ford.
I like you better. I love Hannah
You
Smith.
haven't put me in a book. It's really depressing. I mean, why's Hannah in there when it could be Barbara?
Barbara, I think we both know it's not true. Want to go into that? Hannah Smith, yes. I was born in Ohio, but my family, my maternal family, they're all from Richmond County, North Carolina, Rockingham and Hamlet. My dear departed mother, and my 7 aunts or aunts, however you say that, in this cotton mill town, this farming town. I think my aunt Joanne went to the 10th grade, but the rest of them dropped out very early on. But they were all, and the ones still alive, are so astute, self-educated, they love to read, independent thinking, they do not brook fools, and are still the funniest human beings I have ever met in my life. And they just don't miss a thing. And I still delight in going back to Hamlet, North Carolina, and sitting on the porch with my aunts and my uncles, drinking iced tea, none of them drink alcohol, and I laugh until I cry. So that wonderful melodic, independent, insightful, and survival-oriented Southern female, that voice I find delightful. And, so I have the opportunity to revisit that, try to capture it in Hannah Smith. And plus she's very hot.
There's that word hot again. Well, we've, over 20 books, we've learned a lot about Doc Ford. At first we thought he was just a mild, mannered biologist. Now, then we learn he has a black ops past. Then we learn he has, personal relationships we didn't know about. We've learned a lot about Doc Ford. But in this book, we get to meet some really cool new characters. I'll give you just a few hints. What about the smack-talking Haitian drug dealer named Kondo Obe?
I just like the word condo obe.
Does it mean anything?
No, it actually does. No, it's a Santeria term, and it's not nice. It's a Santeria opiate term. But I spent much of my life traveling in Central and South America and other far-flung places, and I'll be very brief about this. I'll try to. I went to a place called Cat Island, not Cat Key, which is well known, but Cat Island, which is quite large. And I wanted to do research on Obeah, Santeria. And I knew there was Obeah and Santeria heavily practiced there because you would drive on these dirt roads, you would see a garden and there would be fetishes, chicken feathers and obvious fetishes tied up. And I would stop and you talk about Obeah? No, man, no, nothing about no Obeah, man. No, no. And so I stuck around there for, gosh, a week or so. And finally somebody said, man, why don't you go see Fast Eddie? Who's Fast Eddie? Fast Eddie, you might know something about this Obeah man. I don't know. So I drive to this house, and it's a nice, perfectly nicely neat concrete block house with big lions, cement lions out front. And I knock on the door. Fast Eddie answers. And Fast Eddie has hair in his ear so long he combs it back. And he looks like Eddie Munster in the Munsters. And I said, I'm interested in Obeah. I heard you might know something about it. No, man, I don't know nothing about no Obeah. Well, very shortly I realized he was a Freemason, as am I. And so we had a little chat. He said, I will tell you anything you want to know. You cannot write everything I tell you, but I'll tell you anything you want to know. And he told me some stories, very quickly. He said, there was one of my friends here, one of our Masonic brothers. His son was murdered in Nassau. The man told me he wanted to get revenge on the men who killed his son. So I said, we must go to the graveyard. They dug up the son's body, who had just been buried. And so we put an egg in his hand, an egg, or a chicken egg, and we reburied him. 3 weeks later, 2 men in Nassau, they was beheaded on a motorcycle, motorcycle crash. And I said, those were the killers. I said, how'd you know, Eddie? We dug up the son, man. We dug him up. I said, but how'd you know? He said, man, the egg was broken. I said, that had a stink. He goes, yeah, man, that egg stunk. But that's a true story. It's an absolutely true story. So that's where I came up with the name.
That's wonderful. All right, now let's talk about the Brazilian businessman named Alberto Sabino, who is much more than he seems.
Oh, he is. Golly. I just finished the
It's like a test, isn't
I
it?
know, and I didn't do well in school. You can ask Coach Tom. I thought it'd be interesting to have somebody in that business. Doc Ford's an unusual line of work, but who's smarter than Doc Ford, better looking, more talented, more gifted. He's an actor, can play roles, and I just thought it'd be interesting to have Doc Ford meet somebody who's better than him at what he did. And he was also attracted, this character is also attracted to Hannah Smith, which really PO'd Doc.
Well, then we could talk about the wealthy socialite named Cressa Arturo. who seems intent on betting every dangerous man on Sanibel Island, especially Doc.
Oh, I've known a ton of women like that. I don't know. Oh, Lord. Well, there is a demographic that I find interesting, and it's the moneyed folk who may not be well matched in their marriage, may not be well matched. Maybe the financial expedient was the motivator, maybe, and they're not particularly happy in their marriage, and they act out. It's not a pleasant thing. I don't find it particularly pleasant. I truly don't. But I just thought that's something I've observed more than occasionally, and I thought it'd be an interesting addition.
Well, when they go after Doc Ford, how come they always end up in bed with Tomlinson?
It makes me sick.
I mean, Tomlinson scores women left and right throughout these books. I've always found that so interesting.
I know, the geeks get all the chicks. I don't know, it's some kind of...
Well, we won't put you on the
No.
spot there. All right, now one final character that I really enjoyed in this book we can talk about. What about the stray retriever that survives the fight with the boa constrictor? And tell us about the whole plague of snakes in Florida and other toxic pets.
Well, in Night Moves, Doc Ford is coming to terms with the fact that he may well, die before he has a chance to live a semi-happy, normally married sort of life. And he's trying to come to terms with that. And I guess a symptom of his discontent is he finds this runaway dog in the Everglades, and towards the very end of the book, he's wrestling with the possibility of, by golly, maybe settle down by a dog. And it never says what breed the dog is in the book. There are a few hints, but the dog's actual owner is a geneticist, which I like.
I do too, but we haven't talked about the snake.
The snakes. Well,
It's a huge problem in Florida, right? These enormous constrictors and pythons and all flying around, crawling around, slithering around.
In Florida, you couldn't make this stuff up. People would buy ball pythons and Burmese pythons from pet stores and take them back to their houses and feed them mice till the snake got too big or they got bored, and they would release them in the Everglades. And now there are tens and tens and tens of thousands of pythons and constrictors in the Everglades. Just 3 months ago, perhaps you read about it. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission had a python catching derby.
With a bounty, did they?
With bounties and photographs of pythons that have swallowed alligator. They recently captured a python that was 22 feet long. And they're out there. And my friend Mark Futch, this wonderful seaplane pilot, we were down the Everglades, and I once tried to hike from the Tamiami Trail in South Florida to Flamingo, which is about 21 miles of sawgrass. It's miserable. And I said something to Mark about, I'm going to go out, hiking towards this hammock. He goes, I wouldn't do that. Why? Rando, I fly over here. I've seen pythons, so I can see them from 800 feet. These snakes are I wouldn't hike out there. I thought, well, this is awesome for a book.
It really is. All right, well, I'm going to skip over the stingrays because they're in that too. When I'm going back to Tomlinson, Doc Ford in his own way is kind of I don't want to call him a straight arrow because we could never really say that, but I've always been kind of curious that he's willing to forgive Tomlinson some really loose behavior where he holds himself to a different standard. Why is that?
I think we all do that. I suspect we all do that with our friends. We have to, don't we? My golly. I have a great friend, Coach Tom knows, Bill Spaceman Lee, and I've told these stories.
Right. Isn't he kind of the root of Tomlinson? Bill Spaceman Lee?
Bill Spaceman Lee says he is Tomlinson. If you know nothing about baseball, go to the internet, simply type in Bill, B-I-L-L, Spaceman, and about 40 pages of stuff will come up. How do I know this? Bill made me do it. His official voting residence is my home on Pine Island, and a brilliant pitcher. I've taught him many times, Coach. And Bill is left-handed, but Bill is doubly left-handed in that his cerebral machinations are just so unusual and reversed that he's just nearly impossible to follow. He will make these outrageous statements, and then he will prove them by this convoluted thinking that he comes back and, oh my God, you're right. and that is Bill. And maybe a quick spaceman story. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated some years back, one of the most famous covers in Sports Illustrated history. Left-handed pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. He's in Fenway Park, makes sense. He's on the pitcher's mound, full wind up, makes sense. Bill's wearing a spacesuit. This is true, on the cover of Sports Illustrated, with oxygen tanks and a Boston beanie cap. All true, look it up. In the course of the interview, Bill was asked, do you think there's a drug problem in Major League Baseball? And keep Tomlinson in mind. And Bill said, no, it's great, I can get anything I want. And Bill got into a lot of trouble over that. And some months later, after being fined and suspended for a few games, was re-interviewed and said, after all the trouble you got into over your remarks about drugs, do you now think drug testing should be mandatory in Major League Baseball? Bill is generally a brilliant guy, and he thought this over. Mandatory drug testing. You know, I've tested almost every drug there is. And you know, man, a lot of that crap's really bad. No one should force you. It should not be no, put me down. I'm against mandatory drug testing. You leave that up to me. I'm not gonna. No, Bill actually said that.
He's pretty irresistible. So, going outside of the books, have the caviar-bearing Russians returned for a visit? I love it. When they came to visit twice, they brought caviar, and then Randy was kind enough to share it.
Oh, my Russian crazy baseball buddies. They still call me a drunk 30 from Moscow. Randy, I miss you so much. We must come play baseball again. Randy, I miss. You're not staying at my house. But again, the Russian national team stayed at my house on 2 different occasions. Alexei called me from Miami International one night. Randy, my career completely effed. Everything go bad. Why? What's wrong? All games ruined. No place to stay. You're not staying with me. So they spent 2.5 weeks at my house. 27 guys in 2 little houses with 1 bathroom. And I'd wake up in the morning, and I would see Russian guys out walking around in bikini underwear, smoking cigarettes, and using my expensive fly tackle to try to catch fish using worms. And it was just, but I adore them, and we're still great friends, and I still see them at certain tournaments in Florida.
But no caviar. Bummer. We get rum. And finally, tell us about your new character. You were here last September with a lady, and the question is, are you going to return? No. The lady was in the book.
Oh, thank God.
Sorry. And I'm having you see your mama because I can't for the life of me remember her name.
Hannah Smith.
Was Hannah? Was that where we met her? Okay.
Hannah Smith, yeah.
Okay.
The first Hannah Smith novel, Gone, was published last October.
Okay.
I adore Hannah, that wonderful, independent Southern woman's voice. I just finished the second Hannah Smith novel a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, called Deceived. And she and Doc.
Got it on?
But Hannah's, she's a force to be reckoned with, and as Doc Ford may or may not find out.
So you're going to bring her around to see us again?
Putnam's wants to do another 2-book contract, so.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, I liked Hannah. I should have remembered her name when I was doing this. This, by the way, is a really, really nice review by Bruce De Silva, who won an Edgar for her first mystery, and who has really been great reviewing mystery authors ever since. He's a reporter, and these go out over the wire.
Well, that's terrific, and it's so nice to have actual reviewers reviewing books with this Amazon lunacy. Just this, you know about the sock puppet The
Yes.
fiber thing. It's you can, they call them fibers because for $5 you can hire someone somewhere to write a glowing review of your book or to torpedo someone else's book. And had I known about this, I would have had stellar reviews for the last 3 years. But you know, it's just anyone can go to the internet and write anything. And
Anonymously, that's the hard part, yeah.
or under a name that appears real, and it's certainly easy to come up
A
with
sock
that.
puppet name.
And it's denigrating to what we do, to the integrity of what we do. Not that I got all great reviews prior to that, or that I've all had bad ones since. It's just, it's almost meat market like, and it's not good.
People ask me sometimes why the store is called the Poisoned Pen. Notice it's poisoned because Poison Pen was already taken. But that's a version of sock puppetry back when people used to write gossipy letters in the village. And Agatha Christie used that. A lot of Golden Age mysteries used that. Before the internet, you could circulate rumor and gossip and destroy people's lives by writing poison pen letters, you know, and just destroy a reputation. I was always kind of enamored of that, so that was a little literary twist there, plus the mysteries. So that's why I call. Besides, my favorite mystery bookstore title ever, Sherlock's Home, was already taken. I was so sad about that. So Poison Pen is, you know, kind of like, there we go. But it's been fun. Do any of you have questions that you would like to ask Randy now?
Yes, sir.
This book is for your dad,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't seen your dad mentioned in the past.
No, I think probably one of my early books. I think so. Great guy, state trooper, a quiet guy, never lost his temper. We got along, we're particularly close. But he was a state trooper. They moved to Davenport, Iowa. He got his GED, became a chiropractor in 3 years, and they moved away the summer of my junior year. So I got an apartment, and I had an apartment my senior year in high school. But great guy, good guy. No, good guy. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Do you guide?
Pardon me, sir?
Have you given up guiding?
Have I given up guiding? Well, I can answer that in one question to you folks. Any of my former clients here? They never came back.
Then you still fish.
No, I stopped fishing. I did more than 3,000 charters, and I think I've interrupted the life histories of enough fish. But I've fallen in love with stand-up paddleboarding and surfing, and I'm just crazy about it. And I'm out almost every single day, unless I'm in Arizona, where the surf isn't the best, but the weather's perfect. Anything else, guys? I'd like to say something about this bookstore. When Sanibel Flats came out, I couldn't give the book away. No, I mean I couldn't give the book away. And I think they published like 18 or 20,
I have one.
23 copies.
Me too.
And Barbara was such a supporter from the word go, and I have no idea why. And
It's a great book.
And I came very close to just saying I'm not going to do it. But because of stores like this, the thriving, strong, independent bookstores, who actually read books and who call their clientele and who pay attention to what their clients need, because of them, because they hand sell books. That's why I'm here and not climbing a telephone pole somewhere or back from the fishing boat. And the stores like this are so incredibly valuable to the things we love, which are books, the written word. And it's a delight to be here, and I sure hope I can come back. Thank you.
He's been here. Randy was thinking about begging it at book 3. I wrote him a stern letter. And he's been here ever since for every single book, and it's a tradition, isn't it? Your publisher just never says boo. They always want to know, when he can come. So I would like to say, however, on your behalf and mine, that the reason we are here is because of all these wonderful people who seem to get the equation that if you've taken the trouble to come here and we're still standing, it's because they came in and actually bought books.
Well, in that case, y'all should drink all that rum.
No kidding.
Oh, one thing about the rum, there's one from Guyana there, Guyana.
I was going to ask you about the rum. Do you have, it's like you named it for, what, Sanibel or Doc Ford or
No,
something.
we're going to start importing it. But
That's what I thought.
Guyana is it's not the tourist gardens by the earth, trust me, but they're wonderful people. And it's a very, very old distillery, and the name is not wonderful. It's El Dorado. It's not a good name, but it is truly one of the great rums in the world. So try the various rums. There's one in Zayaf. It's terrific.
It
And
really
so
is.
Have some fun. And
It'll go well with the cake. Where's the cake? I can't even find the cake. Oh, it's over there. Okay. Oh, well, there was the cake, right? In any case, it's delicious with the cake. I've been sitting here getting quietly oiled, drinking my rums. It's terrific. But now it's time to do some giveaway. Listen, I am the cheapest drunk known to man. I mean, that little teeny cup will put me on my ear for sure. How many numbers are we working with, guys? 39. Okay. We have, let me think, we have 19 bumper stickers because I'm stealing one. So how are we going to work that
no,
out?
I'll get.
You'll get me one
I
of
think
my
I have
own?
more in my bag. I think so.
Okay. You
I
sure?
had a few of these
I'm
bumper
not sure I
stickers made
trust
up there,
you.
so
All
Trust
right,
me,
so
don't trust me.
how are we going to divide 20 into 39, Ace?
Coach, how well
Come on.
he was
Every,
Coach Davenport West,
let
not
me
Central.
think,
but
20,
I
whatever.
didn't do too good in school, so.
Every third person gets, no. Every second person? All right, so if we start at who's number one?
I'll go back in I think my great previous.
You actually have enough for everybody?
Well, I don't know, darling. I just flew in.
Well,
for heaven's sakes.
let's do every other number, and then if you can fill in, that'll be terrific. Who's number one? Number one? Not here? Oh, hard luck. Number 3?
Go to 2.
We've been driving
I'm
off
gonna
the
go
road.
back. Don't worry. 3? No? No 3? All right. How about 2? Who's number 2? Aha, I knew there was going to be somebody then. All right. How about 4? That's you, Miss Kaywood.
Good seeing you again. How'd you been?
All right.
I signed it.
6? 6? Over there? All right. And then I'll confuse you and do 7. Who's number 7?
Why is this so complicated? I mean,
I'm just making it hard to waste time. Number 7, over there.
And it says shallow up. It's a common expression.
I don't know if I can trust people to pass it over, but there we go. All right, how about 9? Who's number 9? It's you, sir. All right. And then where should we go? 12. Let's skip around.
I love the
Makes
shirt.
this really fun. Okay. Oh, next. Now, if you're a couple, that's not fair.
It's fair if Linda's involved.
You're not. Okay, he gets one. All right. You do. Now, come on. We're at 13. Pick some numbers.
And
This is like taking an SAT. 23, 24,
Whoa.
25, 26.
Okay, 23 through 26. All right, there's 26. All right, but that one goes over to that gentleman right there. And here, oh, you don't count, right? All right, who else was involved in that? You, sir. Okay, and is there one? Oh, and it's you over there. Okay, great. And over here. All right, Pierre, can you hand one to that gentleman who had his hand up over there? All right, I'm going to go back to number 10. Oh, it's you. You lobbied. Oh, okay. And number 30? Back there? All right. And then if he has more, everybody who didn't get one can. And number 32? You, sir? Okay. Pass it back over. 35.
That's a lot of work being here.
35. Is there a 35 somewhere? Is that you? Oh, okay, sir. Wonderful. And let's see, where do we miss? 13? Is there a 13 in the house somewhere? Oh, it's you. Hi there. Excellent. And 38?
Here.
Okay. And let's see, 17?
Thank you.
I'm running out.
How many do you have left?
I didn't bring you more.
He didn't bring any more. Oh, that rat. Oh.
But we have more rum.
All right. No lobbying. All right, 21. There you go. And
You just do carry on, and I'm
I
on the road
know.
for 3 weeks.
29. Is there a 29 in here?
Back next time. Gee whiz.
I know.
Was the,
Is that gentleman coming up there? How about 11?
I think she's got 5 over there.
Oh,
we got
finished
off.
Congratulations.
right. Did you not get one? Or did I not call 5?
Cardi left?
Huh?
Sure.
I didn't call 5.
Got a lot of that.
Oh, 5 was back there. Okay. All right, you get to pick the last one. Good luck.
15-year-old, we finished off. Thank you very much.
They're gonna, how much you gonna pay? He gave it to you, huh? All right, now the good news left is we have 2 books to give away, so we are not completely without recourse here. I can't remember all the numbers that I called, so this is really gonna be